Okay. So, yeah, as Lynn introduced it, the talk is all about Matjes River Rock Shelter. And this is not a new excavation. We didn't carry out new excavations there. This was purely to stabilize the site and to carry on the work that Janette and many others that worked with Janette kicked off. And there's a sort of an extra backstory. When I was a heritage officer at Heritage Western Cape between 2008 and 2010, it was onto the agenda, and Janette was on the APM committee at the time. Mary Leslie was also there as well, also an APM. Judy was also there. And what we were asking SAHRIS for was the remainder of the finances that had been donated by the Leakies towards this project. And it kind of got stuck in the administrative bureaucracy at SAHRIS, because it changed from the National Monuments Council and became SAHRIS. And so we just couldn't get at this funding that was available for the remainder of the work. And so eventually, in 2021, I think during COVID, we reapplied. I think this was probably the fourth or fifth time, Janette can remember better than I do, that we eventually got a yes from SAHRIS, and we will pay at least for some of the money to carry out the work that was needed. So that sort of got everything going. We were then able to mobilize some of the costs, and we went then right back to the drawing board, which was drawn up between Janette and Melis Engineers, or Melis Engineers. So some of you might know Melis Engineers from Chapman's Peak. So the stabilisation work there, they carried out, and they drew up a very detailed report which made various recommendations about different ways within which the deposits at Matjes River could be stabilised. So one option was sandbags, so wooden poles and sandbags, and another one was Loffelstein blocks, concrete precast concrete blocks, which could then be placed in the site to stabilise the deposits. So that's where it really all kicked off, was about 3 years ago, and that funding really ignited us. I think we used the money well. It was about 65,000 Rand in the end, and additional funds we've spent have totaled about 120,000 Rand, because we've managed to do the work without professional fees. So all of the professional archaeologists have worked completely pro bono. So all of the work has been done. The only people paid were actual labour, hard labour on site to help us haul the blocks or to carry up the equipment. So a little bit about the site. So how many of you have been to Matjes River Rock Shelter? I hope most of you. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so for those of you who haven't been there, it's a large site. It's one of the largest sites of its type. It's about 70 meters long, the deposits. It's in a sloping overhang. It's not a very large overhang. It's quite straight, actually. I'll show you photos in a short while. But the deposits built up over the last 12,000 years, and the site is about 50 meters above the sea level. So you can access it via two trails that come out of Keurboomstrand. There's an upper forest path, and there's a lower one which is only open when the tide is out, when there's enough room to wiggle around the rocks and come around the bottom entrance. There's another part of the trail, the upper trail, which we used to use when I first visited the site in the 2000s, and that's currently blocked off. I think one of the owners of one of the houses has blocked access to that, because I think it actually crosses her private earth up against the mountain. So the only two ways in, as I say, is around via the beach, and the other one is on a trail which you use the beach initially, and there's a broken metal ladder which is about to go, and that's the only way of getting to the site. As I say, the excavations throughout the early 1920s excavations, and then the 50s again, removed a huge volume of material in a T-shaped form. So when you're at the site, as you come into the site, the excavated part is up against the rock wall, and so you actually walk through what was taken out of the site, So you have to imagine what the site was like before the excavation started, when the deposit was up against the rock wall. So a lot of that material was hauled out. And it's very famous because it's got an extremely high number of human burials in the site, over 120 individuals, and that's just in what was analysed. Of course, there are many, many more individuals in the deposits that still remain, and visitors to the site will typically go and start trying to find bones, and we saw people piling up and pulling it out of the deposits, climbing onto the deposits, and it's a thing at the site. So the location, so if you, we're in Cape Town, of course, so if you drive about 4 hours east of Cape Town to George, you'll start to move into the right zone, and Plet is just over here on the Robben Peninsula. It's a little bit further on from Cederberg Bay to Keurboomstrand. You come into Keurboomstrand and you would park at the Enrico's restaurant, and that's the easiest way. Once you're there, it's the access to those two paths that I mentioned start from there. So you have to walk along the beach from Enrico's. This is a Google satellite view of the site from a oblique angle. So that's the site up there. So you can see it very nicely depicted. This is the Matjes River coming out here, and then the ocean is up here. The Enrico's restaurant at Keurboomstrand are off to the west of the site along that way. This is the forest path. That's the main access route that is not tide dependent, or as we discovered last weekend when I went back. Even that path was nearly inaccessible because the tide is right up. It had eroded all the dunes just below the ladder. Just something to remember is when we actually carried the blocks, we used this route here. So we were able to access the beach all the way to the base of that 50-meter trail. So there's another trail here, I think, yeah, goes up through the forest up to the site. So that's a nice photograph. That's from Janette's collection that we digitized from the 90s. And that shows the site up again against the rock face there. The property owner were the Salisburys. They had a house, with the house is still there on top of the hill. It's now owned by the Beckers of Babylon Sturen fame, I guess. And they various plans on their side to conserve the site, but nothing really clearly articulated yet. But we had to have a landowner's permission, of course, to work on the site, but they haven't really engaged yet at this stage. They're not very involved with the site, so it might be a while before they meaningfully engage with the site and the issues there. So this is in the site, so this is moving up into the site, and this is standing on the edge of the main deposits that are still intact, looking down the boardwalk. And you can see the type of rock wall is quite straight. It's not a very curved overhang. It's not the Cederberg with typical rock art site or Wormplass or a deeper cave. It's very, very shallow, but the deposits are enormous and go quite high up. So all of this here was excavated away. So the original deposits would have been up against the rock wall. So this is a nice section diagram of the site. So you can see, I don't know if you'll see my mouse move, probably not. Oh, there we go. So that's the T section we keep talking about. And that entrance, it's flipping around now. There we go. That entrance that I just showed you comes in from this side and ends the boardwalk ends on this end. I think, Janette, you put the boardwalk in the 90s. I think that it wasn't rebuilt. So there was a correction there. So the boardwalk ends there, and there's signage up against the T section. There's that additional signage in red that's on this side, which I think was redone by the local community. It wasn't done by Heritage Western Cape, but it was inspired by the original signage. And then this section over here, you're not supposed to cross over. There's a sort of fenced barrier on this end here, which prevents you from climbing over and going into that section. as I say, the last time I was there, just last weekend, to finish off some work on the T section, and people had just undone all the fencing and just had opened it up so that people could just go freely and, you know, go and apparently we were told that they like to sort of climb onto the deposits and, you know, they were kind of bemused while we were, you know, stabilizing the deposits. So people kind of want to feel like they're in an archaeological excavation. That's sort of the feeling we got from a lot of the tourists. So this is also important to sort of see where we were focused on. So Janette's crew put in those sandbags that you can see in the diagram. And by and large, most of the deposits were very well stabilized in the 90s. It was a huge amount of work. I don't know how many weeks you were out there, Janette, or months working on it, but it was a gargantuan effort. And it was very neatly done, and they were using sand from the beach, and that was then dug up, put into sandbags, carried up that 50-meter slope, and then packed carefully into the, to stabilize the sections. Hilary excavated a trench just inside the T section to see whether there was any MSA in the site, and didn't find any. He went all the way down. So that was another more or less 3-meter deep trench in the T section, and that was covered with a metal cover all these years with some wooden rafters and planks and some bricks and so on to prevent people from falling into the hole. So of course people just climb the fences and go and climb all over the site. So there was quite a bit of damage in the T section because it's exposed to the elements. So when we started the work in 2022, that is the most heavily hit by baboons, rain, wind, just general damage, whereas these sections here are far less so. They're quite sheltered by the natural overhang of the shelter. And you know, a lot of them are in still a very good condition. The, in addition to the sandbags, they're all covered in bitumen cloth, and then a cement slurry is poured over that. So it creates quite a hard layer, which is, you know, it protects the bags inside. So there is more damage on the southern end, that's the side. So this corner here, if you're standing on the entrance boardwalk, you'll see the deposits have started to spill out a little bit there because the sandbags, again, are more exposed to the elements and the rain and so on. So we haven't worked on that side. It's one sort of figure out if it's worth our while to do much more there or to maybe recover them in bitumen cloth. So that's a good, gives you a good idea, you know, of the site. Besides the boardwalks and the sandbagging and the extra excavation that was carried out, which was very limited. I think it was only about 1 meter by meter that went down. Janette installed the signage that was put in the 90s, and they also created a section peel. So if you go to the site, there's an enormous peel which gives you a layered snapshot of the site, so from top to bottom, and it's got these very large pine poles that support the section peel. It's quite tricky. That will be quite a tricky one to work with in terms of how we preserve that, because there are some cracks, you know, it's moved over the years in the peel itself, and it's also up against an awkward part of the deposits that we were trying to stabilize. So, hopefully let's move forward. There we go. Okay, and there's Janette, looking exactly the same as she does today. And this, if I just go back one, that is that end point I was talking about of the boardwalk. So if you turned around to those first photographs and look down to the right, this is the sort of end point, and that's further deposits that were excavated that are quite exposed. I don't know why those were perhaps less a priority, because they're quite exposed to the rain, Janette, why those were sort of not as stabilized as the other ones, or is it just enormous? Yeah, so once you go to the site, it's really, I think when those guys started excavating there, they just created a huge problem, a logistical problem for anyone down the line, It's just so enormous, the volume of material that has to be held, kept at bay. So yeah, you've got to be quite practical about what you choose to keep and what you leave to the elements. So that is another shot, which again, trying to remember this, of the work that was carried out in the 90s, showing the deposits that had been collapsing since the 20s, but that was the state of the site in 1992. And there you can see the bidden cloth covering the sandbags that are nicely set up against the excavation. And then the peel was installed, I think, just over here. So this doesn't show you the peel. Might be around the corner, actually. I might be wrong. So it's some of the crew sorting away. They're sitting in the T section. So they're sitting there. It's a nice spot to work. And this is the sign that I think Janette, this is your original sign before it was changed a little bit. And it's again just showing how the work was done, how they had to sew up the bitumen cloth after installing the sandbags. That's again in the right-hand side of the T section. So this is another shot showing how much fun it was to work there. I have no idea who some of the people are, but Janette, you'll know who everyone is. And this is again the same shot, but with the full crew in the 90s working through sorting and sifting through the material. And it hasn't changed too much since then. Okay, so what did we do? So one of the challenges was which route to decide on the conservation. So we had the sandbag option, we had the wooden pine poles, and then additional sandbags with that. So we inquired with Cape Nature about whether we could get permission to haul sand from the beach. That was one of the things, it's deemed as a sand mining permit. We got a flat no from them, and they weren't really interested in helping us make it happen. And we also looked at the volume of deposits we were trying to support. So it was about 10 meters across and 7 meters high. So it's the main section that hadn't been supported by the work that Janette did in the 1990s. And all of that was collapsing away, the unsupported deposits. So it's quite a large area, so if you imagine this rim, that's maybe 4 meters high, so it's higher than this, and then it's almost as long as this. This was about the right length that we had to support. So in the absence of a sand mining permit, we also thought, well, the current sandbags that are there are being damaged over time. So the baboons have been ripping open the sandbags. People have been climbing all over the site. So what would be a more permanent solution, given that there isn't a large appetite to rush off to the site and do lots of work there? It's expensive. So the blocks seemed like an appealing option, the Lofelstein blocks. And we also had Graham Avery's example at De Kelders. So some of you have been there. And there they've used Lofelstein blocks to support those deposits. There you can drive the truck quite close to the site and then haul the blocks the rest of the distance. At this site, it's over 500 meters from Enrico's restaurant, down a wooden boardwalk to the beach, then along the beach in the soft sand, around those rocks, tide dependent, get it around the side, haul it up 50 meters up the forest path, and then you're there. So it's quite a thing. We even looked at whether it would be possible to, crane, drop the blocks down the side of that cliff, and that was also not practical without, risking, collapsing the walls there. It's a very active site, so many of you have been there, that will see the rock sprawl is quite noticeable. So, I'm sure it's a difficult thing to, in terms of ongoing tourism there. So the Lofelstein blocks were decided upon. It was COVID, so I had a little bit of extra time on my hands, and then looked into building a cart, because we couldn't quad bike on the beach to bring the blocks around. We couldn't take horses. I asked around for anyone who knew if we could maybe use a horse So we settled on building our own cart. And so I'll just show you these palookas. One of them is here. So we were living in Plumstead, and we took that design from a photograph from Kenya. And people create these steel frames and just use recycled tires from the scrap shop, create a little axle, and off you go. So I know the eCRAG members were very skeptical that this was going to work. They're sitting on the metal frame, but I had some just planks to support the blocks. And we were able to drag about 16 to 20 blocks at a time. I think 16 is what we ended up settling on. And each block weighs, I think, about 15 or 16 kilograms. So it can carry 200 kilograms or something like that, and that's what we used. And on the beach, we used these towing straps. So we had 2 or 3 people walking in front of the cart with the towing straps on our chests. And we had a couple of people at the back pushing and trying to stabilize, make sure the blocks didn't fall over. And then it was time dependent, because the tide would come in and then it would wipe out your path where you had a nice hard packed area, that you could get the cart through. So you had to run. So you were kind of, when you'll see the video, it doesn't look like we're running, but we're running. And there were 850 blocks to move. We bought 1,100 blocks, but ended up not using 300. We ended up mismeasuring the site. So it only needed 850 blocks. But we had a week that we took off. We had a nice crew there. And so it was this rush against time to get the blocks across that beach. We also had the additional constraint. I know this sounds all very the minutiae of it all. But at Enrico's, when the truck delivered the blocks in these pallets, the community was not having any of those blocks staying there for more than 24 hours. So I had to go ahead of the time, about a month before, with Alex's bucky, put all the blocks, unstrip the pallets, put 20 blocks into a bucky, move it inside ArchRock campsite, where Sunny Ace, who was one of the owners, very nicely offered a little staging area where he has a stepway down to the beach. So we had to move all of those 1,000 blocks there first with 3 guys, and then from there it cut out about 150 meters of this journey down the beach, which helped a lot. Of course, he didn't want the blocks on his lawn very long either, so all of this had to sort of go, and then the tide was also there. Janette thought, "You guys are crazy. How can you get the blocks around there?" And I did realize only later why she thought it was a stupid idea, because on day 3 the tide did come in, and we had some serious problems. And when I went back to the site now, there was no way we would ever have done this project at this time of the year. We would have had to have waited for much lower tide. So we just struck it very lucky when we actually did the work. We didn't check the tides. I don't know why. I don't know what we were thinking. But anyway, it all worked out, and we did manage to move the blocks across the site. So, as I say, we spent the money on the blocks. So 65,000 Rand, that was the blocks. That we bought them from Mobicast in George. They delivered, we hauled them to the site. The remainder of the work we funded out of our pockets, and we paid for the crew out of Plet. We picked them up every day. It started with 8 guys, then it was 12 guys, then it became 16 guys, because we realized we need to get these blocks, across to the site. Jenna and Alex and Patricia and Janette were all working up at the site, putting the blocks, installing the blocks. So it was just, back-breaking, hard work. We felt very honest and felt good about ourselves at the end of it, but there was no finesse about it. It was just putting blocks into place. And then, in addition to those blocks, we went back. I think we've gone back 3 times. We've installed additional sandbags, because there are parts where you can't put the blocks into place behind the peel, which makes a very awkward section. And the additional parts where we've just lined the area bordering the blocks and the deposits with sandbags and the bitumen cloth and the concrete slurry. We also repaired the wooden barrier in places, because we had to break it down for the blocks to be installed, and then we had to fix it, and Jeanette's son carried out some of those. And then the rubbish that was on the other side of the protective area, all of that had accumulated from the 90s, and it was still lying there, ladders and broken bags and all sorts of things. So we've hauled all of that away, lots of broken buckets, plastic buckets and things like that. So underneath the boardwalk, as you come in, are materials which are useful. So extra planks, some bidum cloth, and that kind of thing. So all the rest of the rubbish we've removed. And then the path, as you come into the site, there was a huge thorn bush growing into the path. So the visitors were then bypassing this and created a new path, which then created erosion to the right-hand side of the original path. So we cut that thorn bush down, fixed that path, stabilized it with some broken Lofelstein blocks and some extra poles, and that's actually looking quite good at the moment. So it's quite a stable, nice path up to the site. And then about a year ago, we sandbagged the remainder of the collapsed deposits and placed those in sandbags into the test trench that Hilary had dug in the 90s. So that's full and covered and safe, so no one can fall into the deep hole there anymore. So this is what it's starting to look like. So this is just before we started our work. So you can see the collapsed deposits. You remember that's taken from the same location as Janette's photo from the 90s, where those deposits were still pretty intact and holding up. Collapsed somewhat, obviously, not perfectly intact, but nothing like this. This has just been going on for 30 years since the 1990s. And there's the section peel, which you can see nicely up against the deposits. And you can also see why this creates quite a difficult area. You can't really push Lofelstein blocks into the back of that unless we take quite a bold decision in terms of how the peel is set. We'd have to remove it temporarily and then maybe use blocks to stabilize that area, which is definitely an option. But I wouldn't want to break anything on the peel either at the same time, so we'd have to be quite careful about that. That's Wiltshire on the right, so he also came down from Bloemfontein and helped with the work. And that's just showing you the pallets arrive with all the blocks, and I nearly had a heart attack when I saw how many blocks 1,000 blocks is. I thought, what have I done? Someone is punishing me. And that's at the Enrico's parking lot. This is a month later when we arrived with all our volunteers, and this was day one where we only had 8 guys from Kwanokatulo, just next to Plet, and we started on day one moving those blocks that I'd unpacked onto Sunley Aces Beat, a grassy lawn, and those then went down a boardwalk that Sunley owns to the beach. And there's a nice video you will see at the end of this talk. I'm going to show you a couple of videos which really give you a nice overview of what this entailed. And this is, again, during the work. You can see Patricia down there in the bottom left. There's Jenna and Alex. The joke on the site, or not so much of a joke, was about the levels. I kept going up when we brought more blocks, and checking, are the levels straight? Have they been using the leveler? And I got some swear words back at me for that. But yeah, they kept it very level, and they've done a great job. Janette, it's amazing. There's Janette still busy working on the site. So it just shows the goodwill from everybody that has worked on the site. Those are the nursery bags and sandbags in the T section. So this is now, I'll call this the right-hand side of the T section. So the left-hand side, you're facing out to the site. You've crossed the barrier, and you've got the right-hand side T section to your right and the left-hand side. So that's just kind of visualize that as we go through the slides. So that's pretty badly damaged, and again, as I said, the rain, the weather gets directly at this. It's not as well sheltered underneath the overhang. Oh, and the excavation, Hilary's excavation, is just there. You can actually see it covered by that protective planks. So it was just a deep hole going down 3 meters there. So this is after the Lofelstein blocks were installed. They're actually Terraforce blocks. Doesn't really matter, it's just the brand. But so very nice, perfectly level. All worked out very nicely, and it's nice and stabilized. On the right-hand side, this is just last weekend. So I went back. It was a real remorse. We had a problem with the level we started with our first attempt last year. So we had like a middle section which wasn't aligned, and so we redid that. So we pulled all the blocks down. Just
that's the section Jenna and I didn't work on.
See, we brought the peanut gallery along. Now at the top, so you'll see these are all filled with the spill, but up to that level there, they are just empty at the moment. So we don't have enough soil, so we'd either have to go and haul more sand from the beach at some point, and then just fill off those, but they're not load bearing at this stage, so it's not a problem. It's not a crisis, and they are out of the way. They largely just stacked there, partly protecting the deposits, but also just out of the way. And then we've got extra blocks just to my right here. I think we have probably about 20 to 30 extra blocks. That's the trench I was talking about, and that's what it looked like once it was nicely filled. I was very proud of that. And yeah, so that's not a danger anymore. And that's the wonderful work done by the team. So you can see those beautifully straight preserved deposits now. Someone, the poor archaeologist who wants to re-excavate here has to pull those blocks down. But it can be done. I just did it. It's not that bad, actually. It might look quite intimidating, but hopefully it's not a shrinking violet who is the next person to excavate at Marquis. And there is some cosmetic work, I think. So we've achieved the deposits, the stabilisations there. We've nailed the crux of the challenge, but there's cosmetic work. So we need to sand the boardwalks, revarnish them. They're not actually that many damaged boardwalks that need complete replacement. So it's really just a sand and a varnish. And then there's these little finishing touches where there are these slight imperfections that happen where because of the way it all went. So we could maybe finish this off, this little join a little bit better, with some more bitumen and slurry, and then along the top and the lining and on the other side of the T section, there's a sort of a neatness element that we could just maybe focus on, with just working on just that, which will help. Up to this stage, it's literally been just the back-breaking work of getting those blocks in there, getting them in place, getting them out of the way of the local community. So sort of time was against us. And yeah, so I'm going to play you some videos, and this will really, I'll narrate, so it won't really sound very good if I play it off the machine here. But the first one is a video of Alex actually following us along this route of getting the blocks from Sunny's Beach to the site. So I'll play that one first. So this is Alex standing at the beach next to Matjes River itself, looking up at the site, sort of pointing at the site and describing where it is. And I think most of this material is on the ArchSoc website as well. There's an Instagram post we created a year ago or so. And you can see it's quite a long way up that forest path going up to the site. Yeah, and then she describes going around those rocks. All of this is undersea at the moment, so there's no way you can get in there at the moment. And we had to come around the left-hand side of those rocks, and then we packed the stones up that first holding area. There's a little beach there, and we actually did harvest some sand from there in the end. This is the pile of blocks, and some of the crew gathering blocks and just walking them down this forest path, a boardwalk that Sunny has down to the beach. Then we had another holding area of the blocks, one at a time, literally. It's 15 kilograms every single time. Yeah, all day. Then we had the cart further down the beach, and we were very naive. We thought, the sea's far away, you can walk here, no problem. Very relaxed, very chill. Had some blocks for the cart over there in that holding area, and then we would pile them onto the cart. And there the sand is quite hard, so it's very movable on that section. So that's just us running along, and you can see it took about 4 people in the front and then a couple at the back for each one. And you just go. You just got to go. And then you get to these rocks just a bit further on. And you've got to go around into the softer sand and then get around those rocks and curl it round into this side of the rocks. And there's the Matjes River itself and this holding area. You can start seeing the blocks piling up there. This is the forest path. This is the host of the worm later on. On the last day of, I think it was the Friday, we had to get all of those 800 blocks. Well, no, it wasn't as many because we had been hauling blocks continuously in building. But the remaining blocks had to go up the worm, where we had 20 people, one block at a time, moving them along the worm. And then those are going up into the site. This is looking down, so it's a long way. And that bush. And then you probably see Jenna, I think, at the end of this video on the building the retaining wall. There she is. So that's kind of what was involved. So it was just, really intense. Is it level? No. And then that was day 3. So I'll just pause it there for a sec. So the tide magically came in, the spring tide, and wiped out our holding areas. Fortunately, the cart was packed up against the slope, and we didn't lose the cart. But we had a huge flood of the sea that came in.
The additional labour of now digging out the local stream.
Yeah.
Hoping we get them all because they were 3 feet under sand.
Yeah. And that was when the local community living in Picnic Rock, Ark Rock, whatever, looking down, they really got excited at that point. There's nothing like, disaster. And they were filming us, live streaming to their mates.
Tequila bottles,
Yeah.
you guys aren't going to make it.
Look at these idiots, And Janette's answer was just, well, they built the pyramids, so come on, make a plan. So we had to rescue our blocks. And that's the cart sort of stashed away. And that was just a nice, and that was the Matjes River on that day. The sea just came right in, so there was no room to move at the bottom. You just sort of see it coming in and taking over our spot.
And we also had a rescue.
We had a rescue, so people got stuck on the other side of the Matjes River and all of that. So, Now, so fortunately we got most of the blocks moved in the first 3 days. Then that happened, and then on the 4th day we managed to finish the rest of the blocks in the small little gaps that remained, where there was enough room on the beach. The next video is this past weekend, where I went back, and this will show you, that's Rico. He helped me, so we did the last bit of work together. And this is, you can see there's the Robberg Peninsula, and that was a passable beach a couple of years ago. All of that was just sand. All of it is just under the sea. And I think I finally understood why Janette thought we were crazy. How on earth were we going to use this cart to get the blocks around at all? So it's all, that's the Matjes River coming up to the left. There's no way to get in there at all. So we were very lucky with our timing that, we weren't using boats to move the blocks into the site. Then the final couple of videos, again, will walk you into the site as it is today. So that's the path that we fixed last year. So we redid the path, cut down. So there's some vegetation that we need to cut back next time we go. But it's generally looking, intact, and there's nobody looking after the site full time or anything like that. So it's dependent on us, and other volunteers to do this. But it's not too bad. And then I'll just scoot that along, and just waxing lyrical on the thorn bushes. There's the Alex's path with Jenna, and so it's looking. The entrance is looking a lot more welcoming. It was quite rough with that bush that you had to sort of crawl around. There's a large sandstone block which has fallen into the start of the path, which I think is new. So I think it's rolled down the slope. So if any of you go there, you'll see there's this block that's blocking the path. I thought there's some meaning to that as well. And then this is a arriving on top of the boardwalk, so we've got to cut away at the vegetation blocking the signage. The old NMC badge is behind the bush there as well. And then that's just looking down down the path. I won't bore you much longer. Yeah, that's on the boardwalk, and you can see the boardwalk is pretty good. It's not wrecked. We can work with that, and so we'll have another crew going next year, and we'll sand and varnish, and it'll be a nice, fun job for a change. Yeah, I don't think we have to spend too much money on buying new wood. There's wood there as well where we need to replace. And then the final one is just showing the Holocene blocks in the T section again. So those are the extras, and this is the last thing I did, was just to take a short film, yeah, just showing where the levels are filled and where they don't, where they're empty. Yeah, so that's pretty much the site. So as I say, there are these cosmetic sides to, you know, more work to be done at the site at some point, you know, so not so much that side, but the boardwalks are extremely dusty. There's rock spool, just to clean up that aspect, get it nicely cleaned up and sanded and varnished, and then where these little edges to the blocks and the deposits is to, you know, install extra sandbags and some bitumen cloth and the concrete slurry, just to give it a nice cosmetic finish. I don't know what we do about people breaking the fencing down to go and walk around the site, but it's an unmonitored site, and, you know, I think the Holocene blocks are pretty permanent as a solution